Hello, I want to talk to you a little bit right now about how I made a computer program to come up with random numbers. So a computer never can make something that's truly random. It has to start with something that you give it. So there are two numbers basically that I used as the seed, or whatever you want to call it, to create the random numbers from. So first was to pull from the computer's internal clock some numbers. So here's an example. If it's 150, then the first three numbers of the first number that it would use are 150. And then 150 and 26 seconds after 150, then next two numbers would be 26. Then the month, August, is the 8th month, 7th day of August, and then the year. So that gives you all the digits for this first big string of numbers. The second place I pulled from is pi, which it's not random either. It's a specific sequence of numbers, but there's a mix of different digits and stuff in there. So all those numbers are what I used for the second part of the equation. So think about those two numbers that I gave you and think about trying to multiply them. These are two random different numbers just to show this example, but think about multiplying things out by hand the long way, big numbers, and think about if you multiplied pi and that big date number, what would happen with all the digits? What would be the result? Think how that would work, and we'll come back to that in a second. Okay, so that specific example that I mentioned earlier, that date example, if you multiply that with pi, then that will give you this number right here. And then what I set the code to do is basically throw away all the numbers except for this one right here. So technically I had two steps where it would round it to an integer, so get rid of all that, and then mod 10. So I talked to one of my more recent videos about modular arithmetic. So basically throw away everything except for that number right there. And why that works, why that's actually pretty random and gives you a good shuffling of everything, is if you think about it, this number, the date number, and then pi, if you take these first few numbers, so the only number we really care about is this one right here that's right before the decimal point. So if you take the first few numbers after the decimal in pi and the first few numbers in front of the decimal here, those numbers multiplying together are going to affect around the middle. If you take these numbers way over here, those are going to multiply by these numbers, and that's not going to affect these middle numbers. That's going to affect over here somewhere. So because when you're multiplying this way, that you multiply every single digit by every single other digit. Every single number affects it somehow. But so for instance, if you took these numbers up here times these numbers, that's going to be more what determines this part of your result. So that's not going to matter, but you're going to take, so the first few, and then the next few numbers after the decimal, the next few numbers higher up on this number, those are together going to affect the middle region of this big long result. So all these numbers are jumbling together and affecting what you get for this final result. So pi, actually, I probably went a little farther than I needed to, that some of those probably aren't affecting it really at all. But the idea is all these numbers getting mixed up together are going to make this as random as possible, at least seemingly random. It comes from a specific place, but it's equally likely if you do it a whole bunch of different times and this number is a little bit different every time, you're going to get a good mix of what you get for this number each time. Sometimes you'll get a 3, sometimes you get a 6. One number is not more likely than another result. So problems with this method that I could think of. So in real life, when would you be wanting to come up with a random number? So some applications could be pretty serious where you don't want people to know or be able to predict or figure out how it works or what the number is going to be or find a pattern with it. Like say you're a bank and you're assigning people credit card numbers. You don't want anybody to be able to figure out what all the numbers for all the credit cards you gave people were. So you want it to be truly random and hard for anybody to crack the formula. And the problem that I could think of with this method is, first of all, if you know what time it was on the clock when someone generated the number, then you can find out exactly what the number was. You have to know exactly what the time was, but even if you know close, you can narrow it down to a certain set of numbers. If you know, so if the bank created a credit card for somebody at a certain time of the day and you knew their computer program was based off of this pattern, you might be able to figure out what credit card number they gave out, which would not be a good thing. And the other thing, what if someone can hack a computer, and I don't know how easy this would be, but got control of your computer's clock, so that when this program pulls the date and time information from your computer clock, they can change what time information it's getting instead of going truly what the clock should actually be saying. So that's the other problem that I thought of, hacking your computer's clock. So I don't know, actually before this video I did not research how, I know in actual computer programming there are built-in random number generator things that you can use, but I was doing this because I was learning some programming stuff and I thought it'll be fun to try to figure out a way to do it. The only way I could think of is based off of something like that with the time information to get a different number every time. But if you are interested in learning a little bit more, and especially if you're someone who's interested in computer programming stuff, if you look in the video description, I'll have a link to my files where I have the single digit number generator. That's basically what I described here. A little bit more complicated version that works a little bit differently, where you say how many digits to generate, and then it will say, you say I want a 100-digit number, it will do that all at once, and it's works a little bit differently. It doesn't just do that same thing a bunch of times. And then one interesting thing, it's more on the how computers work side than the math side, but it does show some interesting mathematical patterns, is a problem I was having while I was trying to build these, that I was coming up with some really weird results. And if you look at those files, it'll go over that more detail, and you can try to figure out the mystery of what was going on that was giving me those interesting results that were not random numbers between 0 to 9, but were following a certain pattern that I couldn't initially figure out what was going on with it. But It was actually pretty interesting. Okay, that's the end of my video, and keep watching. I'll see you next time.